So the only thing to notice is that they have slightly different values for beginning inventory, beginning WIP, and that kind of thing, which makes sense. So on the right here is problem 39. So similar kind of setup. In this case, we're making car seats. But we're going through two different departments, the assembly department and the testing department, before it is shipped out. And so at the moment, we're looking at only the testing department financial statements or production reports. But we need to know what value is work in process in testing. We're also going to figure out work in process in assembly, but that would be a different group of people who are working on that issue. So today we're only going to look at what's in process in the testing department. Okay, so direct materials in the testing department are added at the 90% point. Okay, so that's fine. In other words, you're bringing in the partially or the mostly complete car seats from assembly. You're doing in your testing department, you're doing your tests, making sure that they're comfortable or they're bolted together properly. You're doing all your tests, and then at the very end of the process, we're adding some materials to it at the 90% point. We're going to add a little bit of materials to it. Now, what are those materials? Could be like a plastic wrap on the seats to make sure that they stay clean in the rest of the process until it gets to the customer. Let's say it's something along those lines. So it means that we have the transferred in costs of the partially completed car seats, although it must be more than plastic wrap because it's $10 million worth of new materials. So maybe what it is you're bringing in the mechanical parts, you're testing that out, and then the new materials that you add in at the end are the seats that you buy from somebody else, and the leather or the cloth seats, you just snap them in and away it goes, because they're essentially a major component, but it's added at the last minute before it's shipped out. So that's what we're doing. So you get that visualization of what we're happening. But now we have three categories of inputs, right? Transferred in, direct materials, and conversion. So the transferred in costs are the materials that are added at the beginning of my process, but at the end of the previous group's process. So at the end of assembly, their finished product becomes my raw material. And my raw material I'm calling transferred in. I do all my tests, I do all my activity, 90% done. I slap on a soft car seat on top of all the mechanics, and boom, I'm done. That's my plan. So that's what's going on here, okay? And so now I want to do up my production report so that I can determine what's the value of my ending work in process for testing, and what's the value of the car seats that I've shipped out. So in this case, I'm asked to do it using the FIFO approach as opposed to the weighted average approach. So I've got a new spreadsheet for that. So on the left here, we got my FIFO model. So let's start filling in what we know. Well, I know beginning work in process was 5,500 physical units, right? And And how many units did I start into production? They don't tell us that. Oh, interesting. It's just a question mark. But what else do I know? Well, I have that 5,500 units that I had at the beginning. I'm going to have to finish them off. And I know that I completed 29,800, right? So if I completed 29,800, it means that these two boxes over here together have to add up to 29,800. So what's that make this one? 24,400? Or 24,300, sorry.
24,800, right?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is that 24,800?
Well, it has to add up to 29,800. That's true. But we had 5,500 to begin with. So I think we only need to do 24,300 more. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And then my ending WIP is 1,700. I know that one. So if I've got 29,800 altogether that I shipped out, and I've got another 1,700 that are still here, and in this example, there's no spoilage or waste, so that's cool. So in total, I know I have 31,500 units to play with. So if I know that this is 31,500, I guess I must have started 26,000. So I must have transferred in from the previous department 26,000. Normally, that's the kind of information that's automatically collected in your accounting system, right? I mean, that's not something we would normally need to calculate in real life. But I think it makes for a good exercise from a learning perspective to actually think the process through so that you know where those numbers are coming from and going to, and that it's not just a black box. Okay. Now, what do we know about beginning WIP, right? This footnote A. It says degree of completion transferred in. Oh, they give you a question mark, and 65%. Okay. Interesting. So the transferred in terms of physical units, would you say that's 5,500? Would that be something more, something less? Any thoughts? Well, it has to be 5,500 equivalent units, right? I mean, in the sense that those beginning work in process car seats, there's no way I could test them unless I had them, right? So I had, at the beginning of the month, I already had the car seats that needed to be tested, right? So I had all of those 5,500 seats. And it says that the beginning WIP was 65% complete. So in terms of conversion, 65% of 5,500 is what, 3,575. And just to make sure that you realize where that came from, that would be the 5,500 times 65%. Right? Because We know over here that conversion costs are 65%. So what's 65% of 555 or 5,500? Now, this is background information. It's not something we're going to actually use, but it's this month, but it's going to be something we need to know in advance. Now, if back here in the question, it said over here, right, that the new materials in the testing department are added at the 90% point. So, right, we do our testing, we do our testing, we do our testing. We're almost finished. So it's time to add the leather seats. And then we ship it out. So what we're testing is really the mechanics, right? To make sure that it slides back and forth, that it goes up and down, and the springs are working and the heating element is attached, and, all the mechanics is there. And at the last minute, I slap on a leather seat and ship it out. So the only materials that I add, the leather seat, is at the 90% point. This batch is only at the 65% point, which means that there are no new materials that have been added to this group before we started this month. So again, this is just getting in my own mind what has already been done on these things. So the key thing is, what do I do this month? What did I have to do to finish these things off? Well, the same batch here, I didn't have to add any of the mechanics because that's what I'm testing. But I did have to add all 5,500 leather cushions because I didn't have any to begin with. And I'm going to have to add the other 35% in terms of the effort. And the other 35%, I think, is the equivalent of 1,925. Do you want me to try that again, or is that okay?
That's okay for me.
Yep. Oh, good. Good. Because I think that particular aspect is probably the most difficult aspect of the FIFO process costing worksheet until you get to spoilage. And we're not doing that until next week. So the next batch, 24,300, we're not going to ship them out unless they have all of the mechanics, all of the leather cushions, and all of the testing effort. So this tells us what we did in terms of contributions to these first 29,800 units this month, right? 24,300 of them we start complete, and the other 5,500 of them this month we didn't have to add any of the mechanics. We had to add in 5,500 cushions and the equivalent of 1,925 units worth of effort. Now, what about the ending WIP? Well, what do they tell us over here? Ending WIP is, they don't tell us, transferred in and direct materials. We have to figure that out, but that's pretty straightforward because they're either in or out. And conversion is 45% done. So I know we have 1,700 physical units. So we can't test anything unless it has at least the beginning mechanics in it to test. Has it reached the 90% point? No. So it doesn't have any of the cushions in it yet. So, but it has done 45% of the effort. So what's 45% of 1,700? I've got 765, which was the 1,700 times 45%. Except that, yeah. And this one, I didn't put it in, but it's got to be the 5,500 times 35%. Right? Because it was 65% done last month, I had to do 35% this month to finish them off. Whereas my ending WIP, I've done 45% this month. Next month, I'll do 55% to finish them off. All right, so now let's add up my columns. I got 24,3 plus 0 plus 1,700 gives me what, 26,000. I've got 5,500 plus 24,3 plus 0, which gives me what, 29,800. And I've got 1925 plus 24,3 plus 765, which gives me 26,990. We good? So now we want to do the costing part of the same thing. I've got, in terms of costs, they tell us here, right? We've got transferred in of 2931. I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to leave out the dollar signs because I'm running out of space. Well, I'm just going to put it in here. 3378. $790. And that was these numbers here, right? The conversion plus the transferred in costs, plus 0 for new materials. So that's my value of beginning WIP. I'll tell you in a second why I didn't bother putting in the numbers here. I just wanted to put in the total. Well, what are my costs added this month? I'm just going to copy them from the screen. 8094. Uh, 10877,000 469,6260. For a total of 24,621,260. Does it fit into my space or just barely? Now I suppose I probably should have put in the dollar signs and the commas just to make it look pretty. But the reason I did not put in the numbers here and here, I only put it in total, is because in the FIFO approach, we only want to look at what's the work we did this month, right? Remember, we didn't show the work that was part of beginning work in process. So we didn't show the effort or the new inputs or the inputs unless they were new this month. So the same way, I only want to show the costs that are new this month in terms of my cost to account for. So
Professor, just a quick question. If it's those three numbers that we're adding, I got something slightly different. I got 24,621,260. Oh, that's what's there. Never mind.
I think that's what I got. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question, Professor. How did you get this beginning working process of 3,378,790?
Oh, that was the over here 2,931 plus 499,790. You see these
And
from the
that's
problem
3
itself?
million. That's
So
3 million
I just added
430.
those two numbers together. That was all.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Now, I suppose I could have put those two numbers in over here, but I just wanted to make sure that in my totals, I don't include them. That's all. I just wanted to make sure that we're very careful not to include them as part of our costs that we're going to use for our cost per unit calculation. That's all.
But I got different number for that, Professor. I got that 3,430,790. I don't know whether I'm incorrect.
Oh, shoot. My mistake. You are absolutely right. But what I did was I took the information from down here, which I sort of alluded to at the beginning and I forgot to repeat. These numbers were the weighted average numbers.
All right. Okay.
Sorry, I should have emphasized that more clearly, but it's actually these numbers here, 2879 instead of the 2931.
Okay.
And does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Professor.
Okay. Sorry. That's I should have been more clear on that. So yes, that's where this number came from. Was this one down here for materials, which was slightly different. Which means that I also typed in the wrong number here. Sorry about that. Which probably gets back to the previous question of why that line didn't add up properly.
Yes, and I figured out what I was doing wrong. I was actually reading off of the screen instead of my calculator screen, which is where I ended up with something different.
Yeah. No, and again, it was my fault. I momentarily forgot to take the FIFO numbers instead of the weighted average numbers. My mistake. I hate to admit it, but these kind of problems, although intellectually are not rocket science, at the same time, they are really easy to make mistakes in because you have to be really careful and attention to detail. And I just proved that even I can screw up. So, but I'm pretty sure I had the right numbers here in total. At least I better. Yep, that should work. Okay. So what's my cost per unit? And that's the whole point of this exercise is to figure out my cost per unit. So my transferred in, the mechanics of the chair are 9,048,000 divided by 26,000 units that we worked on this month. And it works out to, I think, $348 each. $10,877,000 divided by 29,800. So the new leather cushions that we're adding, they're worth $365. These are really nice car seats. And then we got the effort to test them and fix them up and finish them off, $174, right? Total amount of conversion divided by the amount of equivalent units of conversion. We add this across and we get $887 just for the car seats. I don't know, comfy. Does that make sense? I hope. So now we need to sort of finish off the whole exercise. I can make this a tiny bit smaller so I can go down to the bottom more easily. Hopefully that's still easily readable. So what's the value of my beginning work in process? Well, they give us that once we read the right question. 3,378,000, or that's 790. What did it cost us to finish off that batch? Well, it cost me, I didn't have to add any transferred in, but I did have to add 5,500 units worth of the car seats, or the cushions, at $365 each. So 5,500 times 365, that's probably 2,000,007. $500. This one was 0. And to finish off, I had to do that extra 35% worth of the work, right? Or the equivalent of 1925 at $174 each. So that's going to add in another 334, 950. Shoot. Put in the wrong line. So that's 2,000,000. What is it? 342, 450. Does that sound right? Yeah, that sounds right. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense, right? That I've got this beginning whip, and I could have put this in here, I guess, if you wanted. 2879. Oops. So that's where this number came from, was these numbers here, right? This 2879 plus the 499,790. And so that's where my beginning work in process came from. What did I need to do to finish them off? I didn't have to add any more of the mechanics. I did have to add all of the cushions, and I had to add a significant proportion of the conversion cost to finish them off. The started and completed ones, that's just this line here, right? And to save a little bit of time, because it's the same numbers all the way across, I don't have to do this one plus this one plus this one. I can just use this one. So I'm going to save a little bit of time. 21,554,100. I don't have any spoilage, so I don't have to worry about that. So what's the total cost transferred out? Would be beginning work in process, plus what it cost me to finish off the beginning work in process, plus the cost of all of my new started and completeds. So I add those three together, and I get 27,275,340. So that's what I'm going to debit finished goods and credit work in process. I don't have any abnormal spoilage. What's the value of my ending work in process? Well, I've got 1,700 mechanical seats at $348 each. So that's worth $591, $600. The ending work in process doesn't have any cushions yet, but it has 45% of the conversion costs incorporated, or the effort, or the equivalent of 765 units. So 765 times $174 each. That should be worth around $133,110. Add them across, and just to prove to myself that I calculated it right, it's 724, 710. So my ending balance in work in process is really just this or this plus this, right? That would be what I added, minus this, which is what I took out, which leaves me with this as my ending balance. And sure enough, I've accounted for all 28 million and $50. What do you think? The blank template I've posted to Brightspace. The suggested solution is exactly the same as what's published by the publisher of the textbook. I just laid it out slightly differently. But it all comes down to the same thing. And they ask you for the journal entries for October. Well, what are the journal entries? In terms of accounts. I'm sorry, the work in process account for testing department. We're going to debit the account this much for materials. We're going to debit the account this much for, or that was transferred in, and this would be how much for new materials. Debit the account for this much, which would be labor and overhead. So the work in process account goes up by this much. We've calculated everything out so that this would be the credit to the work in process account and the debit to finished goods. And that's the journal entries that you would be doing. All righty. That being said,